Hi and welcome to EPG Pathshala. This is Professor G. Srinivas Reddy, a retired professor of public administration, Kakatiya University. Today we will have a presentation on two important administrative thinkers, namely Lyndall Fownes Urwick and Luther Halsey Gulick. For short, they are known as Gulick and Urwick. These are collaborators in developing a particular theory of administration known as administrative management theory. The lecture will follow the sequence of first introducing who these important thinkers are, next, some of their major works, and thirdly, the ideas of these people, and finally, criticism against the ideas proposed by these two thinkers. Now, I'll start with introducing Luther Gulick. Luther Gulick is born in Japan in the 1892. He obtained a PhD in D.Lit and served in National Defense Council during the First World War. From 1920 to 40, he was with the City Research Institute of New York, and he was also administrator of New York City from 1954 to 56. He was president of Institute of Public Administration, New York from 1960 to 62. He also served as a professor in several universities and also as a consultant. He was one of the most important assignments done by Luther Gulick was he was member of the President's Committee on Administrative Management in USA. He has written books which are titled as Administrative Reflections from World War II, Metropolitan Problems, and American Ideas. So these are some of the important books of Luther Gulick. Now we come to the next author or next thinker, Lyndall Fownes Urwick. Urwick was born in Britain in the year 1891. He was educated at Oxford University. He was lieutenant colonel during First World War in the British Army. He was associated with number of management associations, and he was an outstanding consultant on industrial management. His books include Management Tomorrow, The Making of Scientific Management, The Elements of Administration, The Patterns of Management and Leadership in 20th Century Organizations, and finally, both Luther Gulick and Lyndall Urwick together have edited a book entitled Papers on the Science of Administration. And they have also written another book, Dynamic Administration. And the third book also they have jointly authored, Freedom and Coordination. I think the names of both these thinkers are bracketed together because of the closeness of contribution. From the mention of the biodata and some of the writings, it is evident that both had rich and diverse experience both in military and civil service. I think the working in military has been the basis for most of the administrative theories, and the rich experience of military, the systems and process of military has been adopted by the public administration, the civilian kind of administration, as well as business administration. So therefore, their ideas got sharpened because of their personal experience with the military. And both these thinkers were heavily influenced by the military service and the need for discipline. Military values discipline, and both of them emphasized on the importance of discipline in public administration. They were also influenced by Taylor's ideas on scientific management and Fayol's ideas on classical theory of public administration. These two thinkers, Urwick and Gulick, have together developed, as I mentioned, the administrative management theory. Let me mention that administrative management is a theory which relates to top level management. These people have studied the problems of administration at the boardroom level or at the highest level, and their contributions reflect this. And both of them have believed that there are certain principles of administration, and they emphasize that these principles have to be understood, they should be followed to ensure efficiency and economy in administration. One more point that is common to both of them is that they both believed that administration should also be considered as a science, and it's not necessarily to be seen only as an art, and it has elements to make it science. One another common refrain or common point between these two thinkers is that they both emphasized on the importance of structure. Urwick said organization is chiefly a designing process. A proper design is important to run administration properly. And his famous quote on the importance of design or formal organization is as follows. Lack of design, I quote, lack of design is illogical, cruel, wasteful, and inefficient. Now, if an organization starts just functioning without care for how to structure it, how to shape it and all, it tends to be illogical, cruel, wasteful, and inefficient. So, therefore, in this famous quote, Urwick was mentioning about the importance of formal organization. Now, we come to the contributions of these two thinkers individually. Coming to Luther Gulick. Luther Gulick has studied deeply the 14 principles or 14 basic elements of administration as developed by Henry Fayol, the French mining engineer, who is also considered to be the father of administrative management school, to which these two thinkers also made their own contribution. According to Luther Gulick, there are 10 principles of organization. In other words, these 10 things should be ensured in an organization to ensure that the organization works efficiently. What are they? Number one, the first principle of organization is it should have division of work or specialization. Now you have to divide the work in the organization and combine the work on the basis of specialization. Second, the basis of departmental organization. They have mentioned, Luther Gulick has mentioned that there are 4 P's of departmentation. You can create departments or divide work among departments on the basis of 4 P's. The 4 P's are, each P stands for one basis of dividing the work. They are person, process, place, and purpose. You can divide the work. If different people are doing, you divide the work between people. If different purposes are served by the work, you divide the work according to the purpose which is being served. Or if the work is such, it involves diverse processes, you divide the work according to processes, and for each process let there be segmentation of work. And place also. Now work may be done at different places, you divide the work on the basis of place where it is done. For example, headquarters work, field work, north zone work, south zone work, etc., etc. The third important principle is coordination through hierarchy. Luther Gulick believed that hierarchy, or rule of the higher over the lower, is a mechanism of coordination. By having a common superior, the work of 2 or more subordinates can be easily coordinated. Third thing, he said there should be deliberate coordination. Coordination should not be left to whims and fancies. Coordination should be very deliberately done. And next important principle according to him is coordination through committees. Luther Gulick was a great advocate of committees. To decide important things, he said the decision should be made by a committee. Committee is a plural body, and committees are based on the maxim that 2 heads are better than 1. So when different people gather together and discuss about something, and there is likelihood of threadbare discussion and knowing all the dimensions of the problem under discussion. Next principle is decentralization. So decentralization results in giving responsibility to lower levels and also authority to lower levels. This helps lower level people to develop themselves, to get experience so that they will occupy higher positions. The 7th principle is unity of command. Unity of command says that there should be one commander for one department. There should not be more than one boss for one organizational structure. The next and perhaps the most important principle Luther Gulick advocates is staff and line. He says that in an administrative organization, people should be divided into two categories of employees: the staff employees and the line employees. The line employees are the people who are doing the main purposes of the organization, achieving the main purposes, are doing the main jobs of the organization. For example, it is a police department. Now, investigation of crime, apprehending criminals, and filing cases before court. Some of these things are the job of the policeman. But to help the policeman, there are so many people, supporting staff, maybe a fingerprint expert, maybe a driver, or maybe other kinds of supporting staff. These people are called as staff. Staff literally means a stick. So as an old man requires a stick to stand erect. So for executives to be efficient, they need supporting employees, and this is what is known as staff. And this idea first came in army. Initially, the armed forces were carrying all their ammunition, guns, and dressing material, food, and all that on their back, and therefore their efficiency was very low. So much of their energy was consumed in carrying these things. In army, first the concept of staff came, and as a result of this, the fighting corps, or the fighting soldiers, and all these people were saved of all the supporting jobs. Some people would cook for them, some people will do some medical service, some people transport them, and some people work on logistics, and all those things are done by others, and the energies of these people are fully directed against fighting the enemy, and the efficiency goes. Similarly, in industry also, there should be division of line and staff. This is the principle. And one more, ninth principle, is delegation. Delegation is temporary transfer of authority to a lower level person without transferring authority. Transfer of authority and responsibility means decentralization. And decentralization is permanent transfer of authority and responsibility. But in delegation, there is only transfer of authority but not responsibility. A superior delegates some functions to a subordinate, but the superior has to take responsibility if something goes wrong there. The subordinate has only responsibility, but it doesn't have authority, but it doesn't have responsibility. And finally, the last principle, Gulick mentions, is span of control. What it says is that nobody can supervise more than a certain number of subordinates. Of course, the number of subordinates a superior can control effectively depends on superior's ability, his experience of the subordinates, location of the people. So suppose people are located at different places, supervision of more people becomes difficult. Small number of people only can be supervised. If people are doing different functions, again supervision becomes problem. If all people, subordinates, are doing the same thing, sitting under same roof and with the same experience, same abilities, I think job is easier and you can control more people. So the point mentioned is that you cannot control endless number of people effectively. For every superior, there should be a limited number of subordinates, and this limit should be based on various considerations. This is the statement about 10 principles of management given by Lyndall Urwick. Yet another important contribution of Lyndall Urwick, and perhaps more popular contribution of Lyndall Urwick, is acronym of POSDCORB, POSDCORB. POSDCORB is an acronym in which each letter stands for one distinct function of executive. Executive or managers perform 7 separate functions, and they are planning, organizing, staffing, directing, coordinating, reporting, and budgeting. And this is one of the most popular acronyms in public administration, which almost every student of public administration finds it easy to remember. And not only for remembering, I think this is a very meaningful condensation of the important functions of any administrator or manager. This says, or Lyndall Urwick says, every administrator has to plan. Plan is just figure out what one is going to do in the near and distant future and make advanced preparations. Secondly, he has to organize. He has to relate people, he has to divide the work, give authority, responsibility, and this is the job of organizing. The third important function of executive is staffing. Staffing relates to what these days we call human resource management. Recruiting, selecting, training, developing, motivating, compensating, retiring, etc. etc. So all personnel functions or human resource functions are consumed under staffing. Every administrator has to appoint people, train them, motivate them, and all those things. Next important thing is an administrator or executive has to direct people. He has to give directions to people. If he fails to give proper directions, people will stay put. They will be just idling and not doing much. So therefore, it's the need of the executive to constantly give orders or commands to people. This job is called direction, and directions have to be clear and consistent. Next function is coordinating. An officer or a executive has number of subordinates, and all their work, they are doing different works, and all these works are meant for one common purpose of the organization, and all these works have to be interrelated. In coordination, one has to ensure cooperation, and one has to ensure absence of duplication, also absence of gaps in work, and finally in coordination one should also ensure an orderly synchronization of effort. And next important function of executive is reporting. Every administrative officer has to report things to his boss as to what he is doing, what he is able to do and what he is not able to do. What are the areas in which he needs the support or clarity or direction from the superior. This job also is done by executive. And finally, budgeting. Budgeting is the entire gamut of financial management. Every executive has to find money for spending on various things. He has to look out from where he has to get money, how to apportion the money, and how to budget it, how money should be released in a course of 1 year or some period of time, how to make good the deficit. Maybe sometimes you have lots of plans, grandiose plans to do hundreds of things, but how about the money? Where from you get the money and all that? So this is another concern or function of manager. And all in all, Luther Gulick was giving a very fascinating, quick and easy to understand list of functions that managers have to do. So this lesson is covering two important thinkers. So far we have discussed about Luther Gulick's contribution, and now we try to look at the contributions of Lyndall Urwick, who is an important co-author with Luther Gulick, and together they have made number of contributions. Urwick has mentioned that there are 8 distinct principles of organization and management, and they are: number 1, the principle of objectives, which means organizations always should keep the objectives in mind when they do their work. Second, there is the principle of correspondence between authority and responsibility. In every organization, people, if they are given some responsibility, they should also be given commensurate authority. Authority and responsibility must go hand in hand. Otherwise, the authorities will be responsible. They may become high-handed. Therefore, a person who is given some authority should be made to account for that. This is the principle of correspondence. And the next principle is the principle of responsibility. People should bear responsibility to what all actions they are taking. And people cannot escape their responsibility, and if the responsibility is not fixed, maybe things may be done wrongly or for wrong objectives or for self-gratification. Next important principle is scalar principle. Scalar principle is a principle of hierarchy. Scalar principle says that the organization should be divided into different cadres, and only then organization will be integrated. If people are of all equal rank, without scale differences or grade differences, nobody would listen to the other person. So organization therefore becomes disorganization. So to ensure organization to work on single file towards common objectives, the employees must be divided into various cadres. Next important principle is span of control. Span of control principle says that a superior cannot control more than a certain number of subordinates. This is based on the principle of psychology of span of attention. Span of attention principle says that at the same time, no human being can do unlimited things. Now, because of biological or psychological limitations, one can perhaps concentrate on one thing or two things or a few things, but not on all things. Therefore, it is also suggested that a superior should not have unlimited number of subordinates. There should be limited number of subordinates. Of course, what the number should be depends on the experience of subordinates, importance of the work, seniority, or the physical location of subordinates, etc. and etc. Another principle of uh, Urwick is the principle of coordination. Coordination is very important. Without coordination, organization becomes disorganization. All effort should be made to coordinate. A coordination is bringing all works to one common direction. And next important function is definition or clear perception of every duty. Every duty has to be defined. What everybody has to do has to be spelled out for him or her so that they will focus on their duties. And if you just appoint people without mentioning what are their duties, it's likely that they may get either confused or they may be idling and not doing much useful work for the organization. Thus, Urwick has given 8 distinct principles of organization. These principles, if they are followed, Urwick says administrative efficiency can be improved. Urwick has later uh, developed another list of principles, 29 principles. It's a very long and comprehensive list of principles, and this he has done by integrating the principles which are forwarded by Henry Fayol, James De Mooney, Alan C. Riley, F.W. Taylor, Mary Parker Follett, Graiquinas, all these people, these are basically most of them except Follett. They are all classical thinkers. Each one has given certain principles of management, certain principles of administration. What Urwick tried is to make a comprehensive list of principles, and by combining and by uh, adding all these principles, he has prepared a list of 29 principles of organization, and they are: number 1, principle of investigation; 2, forecasting; 3, planning; 4, appropriateness; 6, organization; 7, coordination; 8, order; principle of command, principle of control; coordinative principle, authority principle, scalar principle, assignment of functions principle, leadership principle, delegation principle, functional delegation, determinative principle, applicative principle, interpretative principle, general interest principle, centralization principle, staffing, etc. etc. I think, as the list shows, there is a lot of duplication of principles, and Urwick has attracted criticism for lack of sophistication in crystallizing principles of organization and management. I think this list is too lengthy and there is a lot of duplication. Same principle is covered under different headings, and therefore not much appreciation was given to his conception of 29 principles of management. From the foregoing presentation, it's apparent that Luther, Gulick, and Lyndall Urwick, both of them were on the same wavelength, trying to advance some principles of organization and identifying the elements of administration and the functions of executive and all that. They're together in this exercise. But one major criticism against them is that Herbert Simon has considered these principles are mere proverbs. What Simon meant is that these principles, like proverbs, are occurring in opposite pairs. Now, these principles are not tested for their empirical validity. Now, it's not that these people have listed out these principles based on deep research, and it's not established by evidence and all that. Maybe on the basis of their personal experience, they thought these are certain things. that administrators should well remember. But there is a lot of vagueness in this, and this is the major criticism against them. Here we conclude this lecture. Let me just summarize the points I have mentioned. Luther Gulick and Lyndall Urwick are two of the important thinkers in the classical theory of management. Both of them belong to the theory of administration, a particular theory of administration known as administrative management theory. They both believed that there are certain principles of management and administration. These principles must be followed for gaining efficiency and economy in organizations. And some of these principles have been followed with profit by some of the executives both in industry and public administration. But one important thing is that they have both published papers on the science of administration, and they have collected the papers of different authors bearing on the classical theory, and that has a lot of literature which is important to understand the classical theory in a overall perspective.